We serve the kids by creating something special for and with them. I don't know if this is going to sound weird, but my goal isn't to make band fun. My goal is to make band something for them that's way more than fun, that music is something that's much more than fun, that it's meaningful, that I don't use the term loosely or dramatically, that it's a life-changing experience. And that means dealing with real things and having real conversations and being honest and truthful with each other. So my hope is that when they look back, they will say this was a meaningful time, it was a worthwhile time, it was special and unique to anything else that I did.
Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and today's guest is Mr. Len Lavelle from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So put away all your beginning of the school year prep work, kick up the recliner, and let's begin. Hello everybody and welcome to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Summer is finally coming to a close, and whether you're wrapping up your last few days of band camp, getting some lesson plans together, preparing your classroom, or are even just enjoying the last few days of uninterrupted relaxation until that first day of in-service, I hope you're doing well and are getting ready to have a great start to your school year. So now some new information for the podcast. In addition to listening to each episode on iTunes, Google Play Music, or even iHeartRadio, you can now tune into each episode on a YouTube channel. So to access that channel, you can go to YouTube and look us up under Director's Circle Podcast, or go on over to our Facebook page under Director's Circle and finding a link to the channel on there as well. Now, what is unique about each YouTube episode is that in addition to listening to the audio of every interview, you can also view what is called an audiogram, which is a visual representation of the audio forms happening in real time as you're listening to it. So if you've never seen that before, it's relatively new technology. It's certainly something cool to check out, especially if you have something like a Chromecast you can post YouTube videos onto a screen with, or whatever it may be. So now on to today's guest. Today we have Mr. Len Lavelle from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite some time, as Len is an incredible music educator and an even better human being. Len is the high school director of bands and the K-12 music curriculum leader for the North Hills School District in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And under his leadership, the North Hills High School Band is an award-winning program that features 4 concert bands, 2 jazz bands, as well as a 225-member marching band. Being well known for musical excellence, Len has also featured his students at several major conferences, including the PMEA All-State Conference and the NAFME All-Eastern Conference. Len, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. It's a cool experience to get to talk shop with you.
Yeah, it's great. So now to get into a little bit about your program and even your background. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Sure. I just finished my 8th year here at North Hills High School, so going into my 9th, and it will be my 12th in the district overall. Last year was actually the first year that I wasn't teaching orchestra, which was a bittersweet thing. For me, I've had those students for the longest time, and I was hired to teach middle school bands and middle school and high school orchestras. But my job this past year was just high school bands now, and that's a neat thing that the program has grown, where we have a full-time orchestra director now. And I've taught middle school nearly every year of my career as well. And so this was the first year that I didn't do that, and I've always enjoyed it. So that was a change this year. But I love teaching the high school bands, and I'm the curriculum leader as well here for the school district for music. So that's kind of a different paradigm, a different hat I get to wear as well. Before being here at North Hills, I taught at Bethel Park for 5 years, which was absolutely wonderful. I taught at the high school. I was assistant band director at the high school. I taught technology and some middle school in the 5-6 building. And my first job out of Duquesne was in the Williamsport School District, which is a fabulously designed program. And it was such a blessing to start there. I think I probably learned more in that year than any other year of my career. I went to Duquesne. I'm a trombonist. I came around to music kind of late that way. Even my senior year, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I applied for a lot of different majors, but eventually came to the conclusion that music was what I was meant to do. And nothing else really, I guess, spoke to me personally. And it seemed to be the way that I could really serve I got a little pushback from my family at first. I was a good student. They thought I should maybe do something else, but eventually they came around to that idea. I went to Duquesne, like I said, because it was close, it was safe. I was the first person in my immediate family looking at a 4-year school, so I was kind of figuring that all out. And the faculty that I ended up working with there were truly life-changing, and that was a great choice for me. And like I said, I came to music kind of late. If you would have asked me at the end of 6th grade what my least favorite class was, I would have said music. I absolutely hated it. And in 7th grade, I took beginning band class because that was different than anything else I have ever done. And I had to take something. Never intended to continue. I planned on hating it. And I just had a teacher that year that made all the difference in the world. And it went from being my least favorite class to being my favorite class over the course of just a year that way. And she convinced, it was Miss K, is the person that I replaced when I came back here to North Hills, Rita Caligiris. And I tried to quit marching band several times, and she never let me. And I always felt at the time that coming around to music late was kind of a limitation. You know, I spent a lot of time last chair. I wasn't very prodigious. It wasn't anything my family did. But I had to kind of figure it out on my own. But now I feel like it allows me to relate to all my students across the program that way. You know, marching band and band allowed me to do things that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. I had to decide to either be on the sidelines or get into the game. And music was the thing that helped me to get in the game as a person that way. So I'm a North Hills grad. I live in the district now. Just last night, Grace, my oldest daughter, took her clarinet out of the case for the first time. It was exciting and surreal to go to the elementary tryout nights as a parent instead of as a colleague that way. And my daughter Annie is going into 2nd grade, plays piano like Grace as well. And my wife is a music teacher. She's the director of orchestras at North Allegheny High School. So we have 2 music teachers in the house, and our kids still complain about practicing or get frustrated and insist they're never going to play the piano again. So it's an education going through all of that with them again. But music's kind of what we do, and it's a neat thing that way to share that with Sarah and to share that with the girls. And I guess another part of that which was just kind of an unexpected thing. You know, when I was it's throughout my career, I've always been taking classes and doing things, but I never entered a master's program. I just took the courses and conducting symposiums that I wanted to take, and I don't regret that. It was a great experience, and I went to the places I wanted to go and did the things I wanted to do. But just this past month, at the end of May, I kind of fell into the master's in conducting program at Messiah. And so it's been really interesting, even over just the last 2 months, to be back in school myself officially that way. And so I'm excited about getting some feedback. It seems like a really applicable program to what I'm doing, to have people like Bill Stoneman and Jim Colonna and Travis Weller, you know, watching videos of my rehearsals and helping me kind of guide our kids that way. So it's kind of, like I said, a kind of a surprise and a neat thing to be back doing that officially, but I've loved it so far. And so it's cool.
Yeah, that's certainly a very long educational journey there, Len. And I really like how your input you talked about when you first started playing the trombone early in middle school, and how you were kind of talking about maybe music was not your most favorite subject, but eventually to the point where you are now. What was that turning point, if you remember, back in maybe high school or middle school, where you said, wow, this is really my thing and I really want to do this now? Like, what was that moment?
You know, for me, and again, this really impacts my teaching, but I was involved for the longest time in music because of what I would be the social aspects. You know, I enjoyed being around the people and the opportunities they gave me. It was a welcoming environment. I felt challenged. I felt like what I was doing was meaningful. I was contributing, and I didn't feel that in other places. And it was kind of a slow thing. It was just what I ended up. Pretty soon it's just what I did every night. I was at some kind of band or some kind of place every night. And like I said, I never even in that process thought about majoring in music until late in my senior year. It was just what I did. And then eventually I came to asking myself, well, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? And even when I went to Duquesne, it was major culture shock. You know, I thought going to college for music was going to be like being in my high school band. And it was not like that. I didn't have a lot of theory background. I'd never sung before. And so a lot of that stuff was really shocking to me that way. But it's still those, you know, I've come to obviously absolutely love music. it's a part of everything that I do all the time, but it's still about those people and those connections that originally drew me to it. That is the reason that I still want to be doing this every day today.
For sure. So now, to kind of elaborate on the North Hills Band program, or even the music program in general, can you tell us a little bit about your program specifically now at the high school, and maybe some about the program K through 12?
Sure. I mentioned now that I teach high school bands full time. So my schedule at the high school is we have 4 different concert bands. They're all leveled, all 9 through 12. So we have freshmen in all 4 bands, and many years we have seniors in all 4 bands. So the students audition every year for those placements, and we use our local PMEA audition pieces. And I love that model. I've come to love that model because we really can make the curriculum very specific to who the students are, and hopefully it's meeting the kids' needs like you'd want from any subject or any discipline. The music's not too hard for students. It's not too easy for students. We have them at that sweet spot where they're hopefully engaged. They're all wind ensemble sized. So they're all about 45, 48 students that way. And I also teach, we have a curricular jazz band that rounds out my schedule. And we have an extracurricular jazz band that starts after marching band. That's kind of an all call type situation, and it's after school, and it's wonderful. We started that recently in the past couple of years. And my colleague Lucas Bieber, who teaches, he team teaches here with me at the high school and with Chris Rodak, our middle school band director. It's a really great paradigm that way. He's kind of the bridge and between the programs, and he's a wonderful colleague to both me and Chris. So he does that jazz band with me there. And then our marching band is completely extracurricular, and that's the way it's always been. And so you have to be in the band program to be in the marching band, meaning a curricular band program, which is really important to us. But marching band is completely extracurricular, and we have about 225 kids in the marching band this year. It's tied for the largest our program's ever been, at the same time when our enrollment, at least the cohort at the high school, is the smallest it's ever been. We have a little over 1,400 kids at the high school right now that make up our high school as a whole. So the kids are interested in coming out for marching band, and we're a Big Ten style marching band. We still maintain that high leg lift, and we do numerous shows during the season. We're trying to play crowd pleasing music and be a part of the community that way. At the high school, we have an orchestra program, which is thriving. As I mentioned, I'm not able to be involved in that anymore, and that's a little bittersweet. And same with our choir program. I think we have more kids involved in more than one ensemble than ever, and that's a really neat thing and a neat sign of I think what's going on with our kids and valuing music. And our high school is rounded out with our tech program, our theory program, and we have an advanced guitar ensemble, which is a really neat non-traditional ensemble that 50 or 60 kids are taking every year. Our kids come up through our 7-8 middle school, where they can be involved in all those same things that I kind of referred to, and our students start ensembles in 4th grade right now at North Hills. So we have fabulous elementary directors that are down there in our 4, 5, 6 buildings, getting the kids started and getting them excited about what's going on down there.
So with all the different levels of ensembles, specifically now to your concert band program, how do you go about programming repertoire for each group? What do you kind of keep in mind? Do you program any differently for your lowest band than your top band, or anything like that?
That's a great question, and a question that I really think about a lot. One of the things that's unique to us as music teachers in our ensembles is that the music becomes, the curriculum. We have our curriculum, but the music itself becomes that curriculum. Our colleagues in other disciplines who are fabulous teachers, they're probably teaching the same text each year. For many of them, that's their classics, and they do a great job with that. For us, we need to really take that choice very seriously, and I love that aspect of learning new repertoire every year. I feel like that keeps me fresh personally. That discovery process is exhilarating. I love to score study. I think it's an important part of the process for us to be able to teach well and not just prepare kids for performances that way. So when I'm looking at repertoire, I also have to love the piece. That selection becomes the medium for us to learn music. That's our, that's how we're interacting with each other. So it has to be of the highest quality. It has to be something I feel passionate about. if I'm going to be able to share that passion for music with our students. So some pieces I'll do again as soon as the students have moved on, and not just the whole suites or those types of pieces, but wonderful pieces for younger bands. Pieces like When the Stars Began to Fall, Fred Allen. I'll do that piece as much as I can. It's probably a grade 2, and I just can't get enough of that piece. I love it. It's high quality, and it's a great vehicle to share that love of music. So I think when you're selecting music, to actually talk about that now, you're looking at one of two things. You're choosing a piece because it has great artistic merit. Maybe it's a classic, like we talked about, of the band repertoire, and it's just something that all of our students should know and should experience at whatever level our bands are. I think that's not just grade 5 and 6 pieces. I think there's those landmark pieces at every level. And then you're working the other pieces, I think, around that. So then beyond that, we're looking to address specific things in our curriculum. So if we chose one of those masterworks, we'd look and say, what can we teach through this? And we teach music through that piece. And then we need to fill out the rest of our curriculum. So maybe we have a specific goal from a previous assessment, maybe even last year. Maybe it's something that we noticed in the ensemble. And maybe it's something that we just know we haven't yet addressed. You're looking and saying, well, we haven't done a mixed meter piece this year. Or what tonalities have we explored? Have we explored any modalities? What styles do we need to look at with our ensembles to fulfill that curriculum that we have for our students? So I think that's one of the two ways you come to a piece. Either it's that landmark piece, or now once we have those landmarks, we want to make sure that we're teaching our students music through performance and band, like the book says. So when I'm looking at works, filling out concerts that way throughout the year, we're going to play a lot of marches. Marches teach us so much. We're going to look for that major work on the concert, maybe that traditional work that way. We want to make sure the students are playing lyrical pieces. I like to contribute something that I usually call like the change of pace piece, and it can be a lot of different things, but something that is different than everything else in the program and something that's going to bring the concert program to a close that way. Some of the things might be combined. Maybe their major work is your closer, and so then you can put something else into that slot. Something that I think that my students have really valued and I had to come around to doing is having guest soloists. And it doesn't have to be something that you spend a fortune on that way, but someone in your district. In the past 5 years or so, our middle school band director had our elementary band director as a guest soloist. And what a neat experience that was for our program. It could be someone in the community. And something that's really important to us, we've been commissioning a work every year since 1965. So commissioning works is something that there's more people that want to write for band than ever, and I think you can find people in your community that want to do that. Once you get through that, I think you need to decide, just because it's a good piece, is it necessarily appropriate for your ensemble? You're looking at your curriculum that way, and it needs to be a good fit. Sometimes we might really want to build our trumpets. So that doesn't mean necessarily hiding the weaknesses. It might say, I specifically want to build up our trumpets. So we find a piece that features in the way that they can grow. And one other aspect of, I think, planning repertoire that maybe is underestimated sometimes is just the sequencing throughout the year. Just because it's a great work, I guess I'll say it this way. The sequence in which we present these works to our students really does matter, especially at the beginning of the year. We're wanting to play a lot of melodic music, folk song, pieces based on folk songs. We want to play tonal things so we can actually learn about music and fundamental aspects of harmony. I mentioned marches, so we can talk about form and counterpart and harmony, clear dynamic contrast and articulation, accountability. And I want to play a lot of music at the beginning of the year with our students that has some really tooty aspects, not just solo passages or music that maybe the third trumpets hardly play on. Because at the beginning of the year especially, we're looking to develop the ensemble and give them the right foundation. So I love pieces at that time of the year, like I mentioned, that have that common melody that moves through the ensemble. We can impact a lot of people. So we can teach them how to play as an ensemble. For us, that first concert comes in mid-October for our more advanced bands, or early December. So I want to challenge them enough that they have to practice, but that we can really focus on those foundational skills through that great music and address that parallel curriculum of teaching them how to play their instruments. I guess one other thought on repertoire is sometimes that we as new music comes out, we can sometimes hide behind that contemporary repertoire just a bit, even though it's good music. Sometimes either intentionally or coincidentally, it's made to make our groups sound good, but we have to ask if it's really teaching those fundamentals. It's good that our groups sound good playing it, but is it really teaching the fundamentals of those instruments for our kids? Is it asking our clarinets to play over the break and developing our students in terms of their listening that way? And so if we are playing really contemporary works, I think we want to keep asking, or can we still play Irish tune or Eubanks and Brays that way? And give the kids good fundamentals at the beginning of the year. Instead of putting the hardest piece in their folder at the beginning of the year, teach them to do things well, talk about how to do things, and then allow, as the year progresses and we have good fundamentals, we can hand out that challenging work at the end of the year versus having it in the folder all year. I think they'll reach a saturation point that way. And instead it's better to build those basic fundamentals and then get to the harder rep as time goes on. And I guess the one thing you asked specifically, how do we approach it differently with the younger bands and the older bands? It's the same journey. It's the same curriculum. We're looking for the exact same things. We're just maybe not going as far down that road, but we're looking, like I said, we want our youngest bands to do marches and playing melodies and such. It's just at maybe an easier level, but the things we're looking for are the same. Meet the kids where they are and build those fundamentals through teaching them great music foundations.
So to elaborate on that a little bit, aside from the actual repertoire that you would program for a concert, also kind of speaking conceptually like you were talking about with fundamentals or musical concepts, are there any other supplemental materials like a workbook or any other kind of things you've devised that you supplement into your rehearsals as well for your groups?
I think the most important part of what we're doing, where we as band directors kind of makes their money, so to speak, is in developing that ensemble as a whole. And so, I'll throw it out this way: at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of a concert, a sequence that way, we're going to spend half of every class building those foundations. And I think that we think about warming up the bands. But I think there's a difference between bringing the instrument up to temperature and stretching out the mechanism than there is to building our band and building our individuals through musical and technical development. So hopefully, whenever we start each class, that there is a period of warming up where we need to get that mechanism going, but it very quickly transitions into that musical and technical skill development. And so that's where we get into the chorales and developing that sound for our band and developing that sound concept of the ensembles. If we want to take them on that journey, of developing that sound, we're going to spend that first part of class. We're going to do lots of playing with the drone. I think everybody has tonal energy tuner now, and I put it through our sound system and create that fundamental for the students. For the bands that are still working on their steady sound, we're going to do the Remington long tones each day is a good start that way. And like I said, we're using that to create a steady tone. Before we can match tone or before we can match intonation, we have to have a steady sound, be able to control that sound. So we're using those. The Remingtons aren't the end all be all, but that's what it does so well for us. And that's why they've been passed down for so many generations that way. I'm a trombone player. Emery Remington's a trombone player. I know we've adapted all of those to the full band kind of that way. With the wind ensemble, with those students that are in the highest band, we're going to go straight to chorales that way. The fourth band did a great job this year. We probably didn't get to playing chorales till about December this past year, because like I said, we want to have that fundamental sound. But whatever we're doing, we're singing, we're involving the kids that way, and then we'll move to playing chords with the drone. We'll work on chorales a lot, Doug. And it's not just we'll play simple chorales for a really long time. And so the same one, and we'll just try to explore it in as many ways as possibly. Not necessarily a long time each day, but with a different goal each day. We'll work on the articulations. We'll buzz them. We'll play it as a march. We'll analyze the chords. We'll play it in small groups. And the point of that time is I think that hopefully the kids are in complete technical mastery of what's going on at the sight reading level, and all the focus can be on creating that sound. We'll sing it. We'll sing it in different ways. We'll have half the band sing and half the band play. And that's a win-win. They're audiating, but they have that scaffolding. We'll hear a small group play it. We'll swing it with just one person on a part, or we'll sing it with just the basses playing that way. And then hopefully we'll take that into rehearsal that way. So, and we'll start to prepare the students for their music, but we'll hopefully take all those concepts right into the rehearsal, so that there's kind of a seamless transition in between us warming up and us doing that technical development, that oral development, that singing, understanding our function, and then just go right into the music, and then apply all of those things back in the ensemble again. So at any moment, we can go back to singing, or we can go back to building those chords, or at any moment I can say, hey, let's play that B flat chord. Even if we're not in B flat at that moment, let's find, okay, where's our core sound? Okay, now let's play the E flat chord. There's our core sound. Now let's play this passage in E flat the same way we started our warm up that way. So we're always going back and forth between those foundations and then transitioning that into the ensemble, hopefully as seamlessly as possible.
To kind of now talk about a little bit how you said, especially at the beginning of the year, you might even spend as much as half of a rehearsal focusing on those fundamentals and playing concepts. And this question may depend on what school you're in with in regards to what your feeder programs or even your general music programs are doing, but especially getting on things, whether it be singing and solfege, or even just spending a lengthy amount of time on fundamentals like a Remington or long tone studies. How do you get students to buy into those activities, keep them engaged, and also get them to understand the importance of why you're doing those activities for such a long, or not long, but such a large amount of time in your rehearsals?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that's kind of at the foundation of what's going on. And I'll maybe try to touch on it in a couple different ways. As teachers, I think that our engagement, the how of what we're doing has to be in relation or in proportion to what we're asking the students to do. If it's something that is maybe challenging for them or something that isn't as inherently interesting, I, as the teacher, I'm trying to invest my energy level. I'm trying to invest myself in a way that's going to counterbalance that, if that makes sense. You know, when we are asking the young kids the younger kids to start singing, and I guess I'll say this first and then I'll come back to it. You know, part of that, I think when folks try those types of things, there's that initial pushback, like you said, well, my kids didn't want to do that. And the experience that we've had was that was the situation, you know, when I started at the high school. But now it's such by staying the course, it's such a neat experience. Like in our wind ensemble on the first day, because there's not a lot of underclassmen in that group, we just do it. And the kids jump in and we model and we talk about that why with the kids beforehand, but it's just what we do. And with the younger kids, at times I'm silly about it. And I, you know, I'll sing in my falsetto and I'll give them that tons of energy during that. And it's kind of like there's some inertia there. You need to get the kids going at the beginning of that rehearsal there. So I'm investing a big amount of energy to start that fire and to get them going. And then once we get into the meat of the rehearsal and we're rehearsing the music there, you know, we want to create that arc to the rehearsal where they feel like they've accomplished something. You talked about the large amount of time. And I think you hit on the right word, and the word is the why, right? You know, if we're just living in the what with the students, and I think this is maybe one of the most overarching, most of the important things to me in terms of working with students in the community, just in an overarching way. If we're just working in the what, they're only going to go as far as we ever ask them to go. But if we're working the why, and we're sharing with them why we're doing these things, and we're giving them those little feedbacks about what a difference that made, and how engaged we are that way, then they start to see that benefit. And I think the other thing is if we're investing a lot of time, it's not 20 minutes on the exact same thing. We have 40-minute classes, but it's on all of those foundations, and it's a quick routine, and it's fast paced, and those transitions, there's not a lot of talking. We can do those transitions through those routines really fast. If I say, brass, let's buzz it, they pull their mouthpieces out and we're ready to go, because we've taken the time to teach those routines that way, so that it's all about the music making. So at first it can seem slow that way, but by teaching them the routines, really being involved that way with them, showing them the difference. I make a big deal when it sounds great. Did you hear that difference? That sounds fabulous. I didn't know we could play with that kind of tone. And then they get that that response, and that's exciting to them that way. But I think the biggest thing with anything is that as teachers, we need to be counterbalancing the challenge, whether it's something that's really rigorous for the students or new for the students, and giving them that scaffolding to be successful, and then taking them there. If there's results to that, then the kids will feel that it was a worthwhile time that they spent that way.
Now, to talk about specifics now, are there any particular resources or method books that you have found the most useful in those developmental stages of teaching those fundamentals?
Things that we use, we've written here over the years. On our stand in the high school band room, there is the Foundations for Superior Performance. It's on our stand all the time, and that's a resource that we can always go to. A lot of the warm-ups, what we use in the freshman band, it's not the freshman band, excuse me, in our concert band, our which has a lot of freshmen in it, the fourth band, is just some fundamentals that I've written out. So it's really clean and concise. It's a 2-side page, and we just work through that, and we slowly fill in any gaps. You mentioned earlier where they're coming from in terms of general music programs or middle schools or those kinds of things. So we use that time to start filling in the gaps. We start at the very basics and go through that as quickly as we can that way. If there's students that aren't in marching band, that haven't played all summer, we are able to bring them up to speed that way. A lot of the warm-up that we spend with the older students, we're doing chords. We're talking about function and playing chords and just hearing what that sounds like, going through playing the root, the third, and the fifth. And a lot of that we do just by interacting with the group. It's a collaborative thing versus anything that's written down. We do have the Foundations book for as a resource. I will tell you something that we don't do a lot of is scales, and it's not deliberate. It's not that we're anti-scales that way. I want the students to early in the year we'll cover the chromatic scale for sure, but we don't do a lot of that together. I might give them a short amount of time. Have them trying to be working on their own that way, where I have if we're working in E flat, for instance, here's five different exercises. Pick where you are, play it perfectly, and then challenge yourself to take it to that next level of speed. We want to play it right, but we don't do a lot of group scales that way. A lot more of what we're focusing on is the sound concepts, and a lot of that we're doing through just very simple chorales and through building chords together in class once we develop that repertoire of play the root, play me, and those types of things through hand signs.
Great. So now, to talk a little bit on more of a broader concept, if you had to break it down to maybe 2 or 3 fundamental or maybe what you would say the most important concepts in teaching a concept of a ensemble sound, what would those concepts be and why?
The most important things for us to do is to allow the students to play with a good sound. And I'll explain what I mean about that in a couple different ways. So by starting with each class with very, very simple things that we know the students can do well, we're allowing them to experience what it means to play with a good sound, meaning they don't know what they don't know. We need to help them experience what it's like to play with a good sound. And there's a couple things that we can do. Obviously, Equipment really matters. We have to make sure they have the right equipment, right mouthpieces, help them with all those aspects. We need to, obviously, I think we all know the importance of posture and breathing, and developing that embouchure and such. So I won't talk about that. But beyond that, we want to start with very foundational things that they can do, simple things, and make sure we're playing with a good sound. Quickly encourage them to get to that best sound. We'll play this first note just a couple times at the beginning of the period, and make sure we really love that sound. So we'll play it, we'll buzz it, we'll play it again, we'll bend that pitch and come back to it. So right at the beginning, we want to find that that great fundamental sound. Whoever you are, whether we're seventh graders or the high school wind ensemble, that way. So get to that core sound. I think another part of that is to involve the students in thinking critically about what they're doing and asking them questions about what they heard and what that sound is, and how helping them learn to think critically so that they can then start to make that transfer to using that sound all of the time. And we have students play individually a lot. And that's really not a scary thing. Some of my student teachers, it's been eye-opening to me, have commented, well, the students just very naturally play on their own. I think that's really important to us to hear those sounds. We'll do a lot of things where if we're tuning the trumpets, for instance, one player plays, another plays, back to the first player, third player, back to first player, fourth player, and those opportunities to hear each other play. So just even if it's one note, we'll sometimes, with the younger bands once a week, in that first 20 minutes maybe you were talking about, we'll have the drone on and we'll go all the way around the room and everyone will get to play just that one note. But until I hear that one note, I can't start to help the students with that sound. And I'll tell them what they're doing well and give them a quick goal for the next time. I think the other aspect, in addition to buzzing and addressing that every day, and making that bridge into rehearsing the repertoire. So again, if I guess I'll take one moment to talk about this. Whenever we're in rehearsing the pieces, rehearsing repertoire, we're going to at any given moment we're going to stop and we'll sing that chord. We'll play that chord. We'll buzz right in the middle of nowhere for 30 seconds. And hopefully that makes that bridge. You know, I've noticed sometimes there's the warm-up aspect of rehearsal, and then there's the rehearsal. We rehearse the music. And we did this great work in warm-up, but we're not helping the students connect it in a logical way by just letting them have those same experiences back and forth. And then the other part that I would mention to that I said I was going to mention is how we present the music to our students. And this is what I mean by that. Are we preparing them for success by teaching conceptually to the students and setting them up for an opportunity where they're going to be able to play with a good sound? So I'll just, if I make up a for instance now, I'll give you a couple for instances, I guess. You know, if we knew we're going to play a piece in D flat coming up a month from now, we would start during that long warm-up time maybe that you commented on by playing really simple things in D flat. Just let's write out the scale on a sheet of paper. Now let's start to play and using hand signs. We'll do do, re, do, mi, and the key of D flat. So the kids don't even know what piece is coming. But we're experiencing that in isolation. We're isolating them in that concept and scaffolding them on that challenge that's coming. So when we finally come to that piece, we can be successful in D flat, and we're not, giving them a situation where they're going to play really poorly in D flat major and not be able to use a good sound. In the same way, it's fun. Sometimes we'll give the students a piece. Let's do a rhythm key on the board. If the piece maybe more of the essence of the piece is a rhythmical challenge. So we'll write all of the rhythms to the piece on the board that way. And we'll have a rhythm key. We'll just say, hey, someone tell me a rhythm that isn't on the board yet. We'll write it out. We'll count it. We'll teach those fundamentals. And then we'll work on that for a couple days. Put the piece back in your folder. Okay, now let's go and let's work on singing the piece. So we'll sing the piece, rhythms, count the piece, we'll clap the piece, and then we'll put it away. And so it might be weeks until we actually play the piece. We're spending 5 minutes a day on some of the rhythmical aspects if it's a more challenging rhythmical piece that way. But then when we do go to play it, there's not this unending list of variables for the students where they're sight reading poorly and they're playing with a bad sound. So we're hopefully allowing them, when they come to that music, to be able to use that good sound that we're developing and not put them in situations where they're not utilizing their best sound, through preparing them those concepts in beforehand. It's very different than starting at the top left and just reading to the bottom right and error detecting, and then hoping that the sound will eventually come along. If you ask band directors, what are the most important things to you as a professional when you listen? I think tone and intonation are pretty high at the top of everyone's list. But I think sometimes it's challenging to know how to make them a priority in rehearsal for us that way. We know they're a priority, but everything else is much more instant gratification that way. If I fix a note or I fix a rhythm, we hear it right now and it's immediate. But allowing our students to play with that good sound is a really long-term investment. And I don't think it can come after we learn the notes and the rhythms. That's why we have to approach that as a music teacher and teach them how to play with the good sound and put them in situations where they can play with the good sound. So we're not doing one thing in warm-up and then practicing with a bad sound for the next 20 minutes. And that warm-up technical development aspect doesn't have the impact then, because we essentially have two bands.
Now, to touch on with your program at North Hills too, with North Hills and especially being a product of the program, being one of very long-standing traditions, when you took over about 9 years ago, entering that program, having a background and knowledge of the long-standing traditions, how did you approach coming into the program as a new director and honoring those traditions and holding on to the ones that the program most valued? But then if you had to make any modifications to modernize it for today's kids, how did you go about in making those modifications?
Like you said, I was a North Hills grad, and I worked with the group for a long time through college, and the directors here were always so helpful and supportive of me that way. And I think maybe there's a lot of kids this way. If you asked me when I was in 12th grade, what do I want to do? I'd say, well, someday I want to be the director of bands at North Hills High School. I had such fond memories of my time here. But then the really good thing was, I think that I went and I spent a good amount of time other places. And I was able to go and work in programs that were doing fabulous things and have unbelievable mentors. And so coming back to North Hills, there were so many wonderful gifts that we wanted to continue to honor, that history that you talked about, and even what things like our commission series and the style of the marching band that way. And at the same time, I think that we did need to start living in the present more and not resting on our history that way, not just doing things the way that they were done just because. And part of that is that it's a really different school now. We're 1/3 of the size that we used to be when Warren Mercer was in the middle of his amazing career here. We have a different socioeconomic makeup. And you talked about coming back here. To me, at first, there was a lot that seemed overwhelming to that responsibility at times to me. But I think we wanted to look at what the program would look like for the kids today and for the community today while engaging that tradition. And so it comes back to, I think, the why and then the how, and not just the what. I don't think the what things are the essence of that maybe history, the tradition, like you said. And so, I wanted to ask questions like, who is music education for? What students do we want to be involved in band? Why should they be involved in band? What do we want students to say about their experience here? And then that question can answer, how do we expect students to act, and what would a rehearsal look like, and what should our schedule look like, and do we travel or not, and all of those things. And what do we want our parents to say about the band program when their students leave, and what do we want our community to say about the band program? And really looking at those things and being honest about what people were saying or were thinking, or their perception of the program was, or what we were actually doing. And that's the tough part, was being honest with that, and looking at places where we can grow. And so from there, then we just started sharing that vision, I think, with the kids and the parents and the administrators. And then that work has to bring results for them, so it's meaningful and worthwhile. and the music has to be great for it to be real. It's, music isn't a social club that way. There's great social aspects, but it's the music that brings us together. And the group is so much more than the music, but we have to honor the music that way. And, you talked about that history and tradition. I know when I was coming here and Miss K was leaving, she shared with me how excited she was that someone that wore the uniform was able to come back here, who sees it from the other side. So, the work that we do every day is the way that we say thank you to those alumni and those directors, like Ms. Kay and Mr. Matthews and Warren Mercer and Fred Del Monte and Mr. Sorgel and all those folks that came before us that way. And so making those modifications with the kids when we're looking at, I think you said making relevant or modernizing, to our kids today. I think that it all comes back to the why. And I know I've said that a couple times. We could never, when we're evolving that way, we could never write a handbook that covers anything or everything that the students should or shouldn't do. We have a handbook and we have a syllabus, but I share with the students that if we're referencing it, that's a symptom that we're doing something wrong. The same as rubrics. It's important to have great rubrics, but they're limiting, I think. I share with the students, if we're doing the right things, the grades will take care of themselves. Let's focus on doing the right things. If we're having an issue in any of those places, then it's a symptom of a bigger concern. So we were just looking about what are the right things that we should be doing. And we start talking with our seniors and our board members and the parents, the students and the parents independently. Building that support with the parents is much of an important part of growing again than is just as much as growing with the students. And we come at it from a standpoint of what could the program be if it could be anything, if it could be anything at all. And I think the essence comes down to when the kids, we need to make them or help them want to do it together. You can't box people in. You can't force anyone to do anything. You'll never get the best by trying to box them in and force things, creating just a better policy or a better rubric. You have to go back to the why and help the kids want to do it. And I think, kids today, they don't want an easy ride necessarily. They want to be challenged. They want to be in a situation that they think they feel that it's meaningful, that they're valued, that they feel alive in what they're doing and have those strong social interactions and make sacrifices and work hard. Those things are okay. And then we deliver as their teachers to gain their trust, and then they'll put themselves out there again. And it goes for parents and kids and administrators, and just by talking honestly with them at booster meetings, and it's practices, and it's time consuming, but that's how you make those changes. And I know this your podcast is on leadership. I'll share with you that I am humbled every day by what the North Hills students and the community are doing. Coming back here, what the kids are doing is honestly so far beyond my vision than when I first came back of who would be involved and what the kids are able to accomplish. The kids have grown so much in that time, and it's nothing that I had to redefine my vision. It happens together, I think, with the kids and the parents. We were able to create more than I ever could have imagined for the kids. And that's what synergy is, right? And I can never do what we can do. And so having the kids on board and having them be a part of creating that vision for their program, they'll embrace those things. And they're proud of their tradition. But we talk actively. We have a record player in the front of the room, and I play them records from the 60s and the 70s, and that's real, and we think about that all the time. But we need to create it now. We don't want to just be known for that tradition of when our school was 3 times as big as it was now. We need to make that real for each other now, and the kids are the ones that do that by being a part of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I especially like the part where you talked about keeping them on board with the records. That's really cool. So are some of the records like from the bands back in the day?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we have to explain to them what they are at first. One of the kids put on a record recently. It was really funny, and they had it on the wrong speed. And they said, "Oh, wow, the band played really fast then." And I had to go over and just switch it back to 78. They had it on they essentially didn't know how to use a record player, so it was funny. But yeah, those recordings are there. Like I said, it's at the front of the room, and it's important to us to know that know whose shoes we're walking in. We stand on the shoulders of those people that came before us.
Yeah, and they can definitely be insightful too. I know even just understanding like traditions of band through the generations I can relate to. I know like a couple weeks ago in the summer I went to go visit my parents, and back in the day my parents used to go to PMEA festivals too, like District Band or whatnot. But even like when they used to have the old records of those, seeing the pictures and actually looking at that large band and seeing that all the tuba players actually back in the day for concert festivals had sousaphons. It's just really unique to see like old traditions like that too. So now, to get back into talking shop a little bit, could you talk a little bit about maybe one or two of your favorite rehearsal tactics?
We do a lot of singing in rehearsal, and I know I've alluded to that. We've talked about making that happen, and when the kids start to do it well, it's just exciting, and we just integrate it. It's just what we do. I never say, hey, kids, we're going to sing today. It's just what we do. And I'm a bad singer, Doug. It was not comfortable for me. It's just, as I mentioned, I think before, going to college was hard for me. I'd never sung in a choir and such. And so it's a stretch for me, but I know it's what the kids need to do that way. And they embrace it now. And it's cool to we'll sing when we do drill. Part of that, I guess, you're talking about rehearsal tactics. We rehearse marching band and concert band the exact same way. It's just one band program. And so the things, if I hold up do in front of the marching band, the kids just sing do. If we can say, hey, let's do that set and let's sing, and we're going to sing the same way that we do in wind ensemble. And I think that's where you start to get that exponential growth about what we're doing, that it's what we do. It's reinforced all the time. And I think that's really a impactful thing that I would be remiss in not talking about, that we do those same things, that, playing at that B flat chord. We end every rehearsal, try to end every rehearsal. We've had a lot of rain lately. Try to end every rehearsal by marching across the field, playing that big fat B flat chord that we started the concert band rehearsal with when I talked about we were singing do, mi, and sol. So making those connections, I think they really can start to exponentially reap the benefits of those things. And, we teach the kids how to tune in marching band the same way. We sing, we have the section leaders sing, and then we match to each other that way. We really enjoy using mixed seating a lot. We perform sometimes that way. But I think if you want to ask about a rehearsal tactic, maybe I could sum it up by the difference between talking about things and doing things. And instead of talking about doing things, asking the group to say, hey, you need to listen. Actually giving them opportunities where they really do get to listen, and they sit in mixed seating, and we record them, and we sing together, and do those types of things where they have to be listening to audiate to create those sounds. I love to when the kids get something right. This is something that I remember from a teacher that I had. We so often work 5 takes. Yep, that's it. We've got it. We did it right. One time, whatever that aspect it is. Very often, right after we do that, we go back and play it wrong again, and then immediately contrast with it being right again, because we inched up to that. So it's kind of like we need to know just as much what's wrong. Okay, play it long again. Oh, now play it with that great short sound. Play it long again. Now play it that great short sound, and really allow that to stick. And then I think one other thing that's really helpful to us, and it goes back to some of that, I guess what I talked about at the beginning with a lot of our warm-ups are just being in that functional sound together, is we have a lot of hand signs that kind of developed. It wasn't my goal to develop them, but it started with just, the hand sign for do when we started incorporating the solfege, and then we'd have do and sol, and I can do it, with 2 hands. So if I give do and sol, the kids just know whatever we're keying to play do and sol that way, and they'll play along with hand signs if I ask them to in the key. If we're doing a new piece, we'll write out the key at the top of the page, and we'll write do under E flat or do under F, etc. But having those hand signs, we ask the kids to listen that way. But I think we need to develop them to being sensitive to those sounds. So if I show 3 fingers, the kids will play the chord. If there's any moment where I extend my hand to one student and give a release, then everybody stops playing. That person keeps playing their sounds. So we have a lot of things that we can do non-verbally right in the middle of the piece to connect those warm-ups, like I mentioned earlier, into the pieces. And I think the same goes for conducting. We want the kids to listen and respond. I think sometimes it's humbling when we realize how little our students need us. It's if we ask the students to just play the piece, they can do a lot without us conducting. So when you allow the kids to do that, play without a conductor, you really get an idea of what they can, things that you can and should be impacting with your conducting, and the things that the students don't need for you to do. And so if you're always giving that stimuli, you want the things to matter when we conduct. So take that away, see what they can do, and then allow them to just, instead of keeping that beat, allow them to really respond to your conducting. So experiencing those things instead of talking about them, those nonverbal kind of things. With younger kids, it works the same for little things like bringing the instrument up, jumping on and off the podium as a way of starting the class instead of talking about it, and making it about music and listening more. So the more that we can get to as you and I talk about making music, the more that we can just get to the making music, make some of those things nonverbal, I think the more that we can really engage their ears that way.
For sure. So, in regards to leaders, which ones have inspired you along your way in your career as a musician and educator, and what lessons have you taken from them?
As a teacher, the folks that have been the leaders that have made a positive change for me in my life were those so many mentors. And they led by walking the walk and doing right by kids. I think it's one of the best parts of our industry is the way that we support each other. When our programs get better, when the tide rises, all of those boats rise. We have those programs to aspire to, and it shows strength in what we're doing. And the same thing happens when there's a program that if there's any kind of reduction, we all get weaker. We're one industries, maybe not the best word, but we're one community of music educators that way. So those leaders that made the difference for me, my teachers here at North Hills, Miss Kay, Rita Calagiris, and Dave Matthews, who I directly replaced at the high school 11 years ago, were just great leaders in terms of mentoring for me about how to teach. And when I went to Duquesne, I really didn't know what I was getting into, but there were so many inspirational leaders there. Chris Jordanoff, who was the chair of music ed, she was the choir director, but she's the one that so stressed about how teaching students about teaching them music and through the repertoire. And I think back to the way that she would present concepts and show us how to teach general music. And apply that just to the band program. Learned so much from her that way. Bob Cameron, when I was at Duquesne, gave me opportunities that I wasn't ready for, but conducting their college ensembles there, and I'm so grateful for now. But and then when I was at Duquesne, Tim Lotzenheiser was teaching there every week. That's who I had for band methods, and that was just life changing. And having that relationship for the last 20 years has been beyond words. To know Tim that way and still have him involved with our programs has been life changing. And Tim's leading all of us all the time by walking the walk. I had great student teaching experiences. My middle school choir teaching experience, I student taught with Dave Wotan, and he did things at the time, made me read the Harry Wong First Days of School book and things like that, and just opened my eyes about teaching in general. And he does it day in and day out. And I had a really unique experience when I went to Williamsport. My principal was the band director 2 directors ago. So in that building, he was the band director. So I had his former job. And my mentor was now at the high school. And we had a music administrator, Rick Coulter, who would come into my classroom all the time. And it was just a phenomenal experience to have these great teachers. It was challenging, but the amount of feedback that I got, and so that's why I've always taken as many student teachers as I can to give them the same experiences. When I went to Bethel Park, there were still so many great teachers and leaders that I had there. I always remember Jim Perrine said to me once, I had a concert and we played Cajun folk songs. It was early in my career, and with a 9th grade band, and I was so excited about it. And he said to me afterwards, he said, "Len, it's so great that you played Cajun folk songs, but you should go and listen to the recording and see if you liked how the band sounded doing it." And I remember that to this day, and it's impacted my teaching so much that way. Those times when people have cared enough about me and music to kind of speak honestly that way. And now, it's so neat that we have this community. Even today, John Thompson out at New Trier, who's retired from New Trier High School now, he's a North Hills grad, who is he's been a mentor from afar, and he's all always willing to take time and talk and asks how the program is going and cares so deeply today and leads by caring that way. And we have so many great leaders even here in Pennsylvania and around the area, great conductors, folks like Steve Gage and Jason Wars. But we had Scott Tobias out at from WVU just last spring, and man, what a great guy he is. And again, just giving so much to our programs around us. And my wife is an amazing musician, and I think I mentioned before how great it is to come home and be able to talk to her about making music and have that partner at home that way. So it's a long answer, but I think that's kind of the collective power of our profession. We get to give and steal from each other because it's not about us. It's about the music that way and passing it on. So, and that's why this project is just so neat to go and to listen to your other interviews. But I try to listen like Dave Matthews did when I was a student here, and I try to have those relationships like Miss Kay did, and when I was taught at Bethel Park, Dave Bitso, the way that he took care of the program and his ability to connect with the community of parents was just so humbling and so meaningful. And the excitement that Steve Gage brings to the podium every time he conducts. And so just trying to do a little bit of justice to all those great people that we have out there that are just leading by making a positive change for others every day. It's, one of the definitions of leadership, make a positive change for others. So just doing it day in and day out and walking the walk with other people. There's so many folks out there that if we just look around, we have such great examples.
Wow, that's certainly a list. So what are 3 words or characteristics you would use to describe somebody who's an outstanding leader for a comprehensive music program? Three.
So to be a leader, you have to have a vision. So leadership, we use that word a lot nowadays, but leadership isn't a goal in and of itself. It's a means to an end. So there has to be a vision that you're choosing to lead towards or being a part of. And so I think a leader creates something that doesn't normally exist. That's what they're doing, and helps others be a better version of themselves. So to lead the program, I think we need to understand the community, seek first to understand those of us around us. Where are we and where do we want to be? So that vision, there's no leadership without vision. I think that to lead a successful program, you have to be very determined and be willing to persevere. Leading in any sense can be very lonely at times. To lead, you sometimes need to separate. You need to step out, and it can get lonely fast that way. And in bringing people to the next level, but you got to kind of punch through, and it puts a target on your back. You have to be ready for that criticism, especially for those around you that are maybe comfortable or not understanding yet where the group can grow. And that's why you call it growing pains. It's that lobster shedding its shell. And you have to be ready to fight, I think. And I don't know if that sounds weird, but so much of it is just staying the course. It's easy to give up or quit when that adversity comes, towards that vision, but never compromising that vision. So I think you have to have a vision. You have to be willing to persevere. And then I think you have to be selfless. Leading's about what you give away. You got to walk the walk. It has to be programmed before self and build a community for the people behind you. It's thankless. But sometimes there will be thanks, but those words of appreciation can't be that motivator. It has to be about making that difference for other people that will never even realize what the program or what you did for each other, and that's okay. So I think if you want 3 words, that's it. You got to have that vision. You got to be determined to work towards that vision and giving it away, being selfless along the way.
Yeah, I really liked how you mentioned there about having that visionary mindset, just kind of keeping everything geared towards the program. So now, if you had to offer advice for any band director or even music director in general, whether it be choir or band, whether they be in a large school district, in an urban setting, or even somebody maybe in a rural setting that might only have 15 members in their high school band, what advice would you give them to help their students thrive?
Well, I think that you have to start with, to go back to what you said about that vision, how do you define thriving? What does it mean to thrive? Are we talking about musically or non-musically or both? I share this sentiment with our students often, that what we're doing has nothing to do with music or the music, but it has everything to do with the music. And that's that aspect of just teaching that life through music. And so for me, it comes back to, when you're talking about thriving, how does our band live? There's a lot of that information about music making us smarter and connections and teaching social skills. And that's all wonderful. And I agree with all of that. But it matters what we do in our music programs, our band programs. And any of those situations that you talked about, as widely different as they were, it has the potential to build, music has the potential to build passionate people, but it has the potential to build sloppy people if we go about our daily business in a sloppy way. It can help students be more organized, or it can encourage them to be less organized. It can give them opportunities to be passionate or apathetic, disciplined or undisciplined, lazy or loving. And so the music itself is the medium. It doesn't do it on its own. We need to create that culture. So I think thriving is about culture. Music is totally worthy of study on its own, just like any other subject that we're teaching in the schools. But most students aren't going to major in music, and it's that culture that they're going to be able to take with them along with those musical lessons. And it's the culture that's going to let them be able to be successful musically. If it's a caring and a learning and a respectful culture, one that empowers them, has high standards, and the students feel accountable, that's a big part of what they're going to take away. So, you asked about thriving. I think it's possible for students to get a superior in adjudication and have not learned very much, or to have a superior and not have those many benefits of music, maybe learning 21st century skills and interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. So I think how we teach matters. I talked about Dr. Tim, and the impact he has. I think of how he says all the time, how we do anything is how we do everything. And so involving our students that way. How do we live as an organization? Do we teach the students to learn well? Do we teach them? There's that cooperative element, obviously, to ensemble music. And do we cultivate that? And do we empower our students to learn beyond us? Do we create that synergy, that sum of the parts, and then send them off so they can be thinkers and doers, loving music, but having those lessons that they learned? And I think comes from having those conversations about what we're trying to create, even with young students, even with elementary general music students, in an appropriate way about, we're here to make great music together, and this is why music is so wonderful and what it allows us to do. And that communication, whether it's elementary general music or high school marching band, becomes that spark, and we can be honest about where we are and where we want to be if we could go anywhere. But it comes back to that community, and that strength is in being together. Again, whatever thriving, however you're going to define thriving, and you find the littlest things that you can do together, and then you can build on that and work to make everything else at that same level. But it starts with finding that commonality, doing something together, and just building on it every day.
Now, to touch on your students, whenever a student would come through your program, or even how you said with some of the students that you worked with when you taught with the middle school component of your job in past years, once a student will go through your program and graduate at the end of their senior year, how would you like to be remembered by them as a leader for your music program?
I want them to think that I hopefully did right by them and by our program and by our community. As simple as, we serve the kids by creating something special for and with them. And if they think back that they had really meaningful, I don't know if this is going to sound weird, but I don't think my goal isn't to make band fun. My goal is to make band something for them that's way more than fun, that music is something that's much more than fun, that it's meaningful, that I don't use the term loosely or dramatically, that it's a life-changing experience. And that means dealing with real things and having real conversations and being honest and truthful with each other. So my hope is that when they look back, they will say, this was a meaningful time, it was a worthwhile time, it was special and unique to anything else that I did. There's tons of clubs where we can hang out and a million ways we can spend our time. But hopefully this experience was unique and special through the connections that we made, the music that we made. And again, that comes from having a real and deep relationship, not always saying what everyone wants to hear. And it comes from working hard and sweating together and having those experiences. I think that's what kids want. I think that's what they're sometimes missing that way. lots of opportunities. They can be alone and on cell phones and play games and all that kind of stuff. And music gives us a chance to be alive. And I want them to know that they spent that time well, and that it was that I was there supporting them by caring about them, by giving them those greatest experiences, even if they were challenging physically or mentally or musically at any given time.
Yeah, lots of great responses there, Len. Especially I enjoyed listening to how you talked about making it meaningful for them. That's a really great response. So that does it for all of our questions now. I'd like to thank you again for joining us here on the podcast. It was a great learning experience for me. I know it'll be a great learning experience for others listening to all of this wonderful insight. And just again, I'd like to thank you for so much of your time, wisdom, and insight.
This was great, Doug. It's just great to talk shop, and it's really cool that you're doing this. So I hope you'll keep up the project. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Mr. Len Lavelle for his time, wisdom, and insight on how he directs and leads a thriving band program. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, and iHeartRadio to stay updated on all future episodes. And also make sure to check out our page on Facebook under Director's Circle, as well as the new YouTube channel under Director's Circle Podcast. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in to the next edition of Director's Circle.